Our Ontario PC caucus has poured over the Liberal government's budget for this year. Today's Liberal budget confirms what the Ontario PC caucus has been saying all along. Life is harder and more expensive under the Liberals, and life will continue to get more expensive for the people of Ontario. We believe this budget was a chance for the government to show the people of Ontario that they were listening. The fact that the budget doesn't reference the reduced UPX fare rates, nor its recent PTSD legislation, is just further proof that this budget was printed before they considered any of the valued input from the public. The Ontario PC caucus had laid out 3 reasonable recommendations we feel the people of Ontario deserve to see represented in the Liberal government's budget. These recommendations were based on what we've been hearing around the province and more recently in Whitby, Oshawa. We asked the government to ensure a credible plan for affordable energy. Instead, energy prices will continue to go up, and this government is moving full steam ahead with the sale of Hydro One. There's no guarantee the money put up to the fight against climate change actually goes towards it. The government will prioritize paying for their political priorities over reducing emissions every single time. We asked the government for a plan to properly manage Ontario's healthcare system. Instead, we continue to see the government has no plan to improve the dismal state of patient care in the province. The government continues to claim they are prioritizing mental health services, yet there is no new funding for mental health and addictions strategy, no new funding allocated for PTSD services. They will tell you they are increasing funding for hospitals, but they fail to tell you that after 4 years of frozen hospital budgets, they are cutting other envelopes of funding, like the gaming revenue from OLG profits. To be clear, the funding is not enough to make up for new patient growth, inflation, or make up for the last 4 years of frozen hospital budgets. We asked the government for a credible plan to balance the budget, including immediate action to pay down the debt. Yet after 13 years of reckless spending, the government is balancing their books, or attempting to balance their books, on the backs of students, seniors, and families. The budget projects $4 billion more in revenue than the maximum the Financial Accountability Officer said was possible under best-case scenarios. So be very clear, the government's numbers are not consistent, even in the slightest, with the Financial Accountability Officer. The fact that it's $4 billion off on what the Financial Accountability Officer said was a best-case scenario leaves us to believe there's only one possible way to find that funding, and that would be in new taxes. They will tell you they are balancing the budget, but they will fail to tell you that the tax revenue will rise by more than $3 billion under their own projections to pay for their mismanagement. If you look at page 282 in the budget, they allocate $1.9 billion collected increased in personal income taxes, $700 million more in corporate taxes, $500 million in carbon taxes. The reality is taxes are going up. We will continue to see a government that is claiming one thing but doing another. They will boast about tuition for students, but they fail to tell you they are cutting $165 million in student tax credits before the new program even starts. They will tell you they are supporting Ontario seniors, yet the vast majority of seniors will now pay nearly double their deductible on the medications they depend on, plus more for every single medication they have to buy. They will tell you they have a credible plan to reduce carbon emissions, yet cap and trade is a new tax grab on home heating and gasoline with no guarantee the money will go to fighting climate change. And I'll be very clear on this point. I take climate change seriously, and if this fund was about climate change, if it was about the environment, the government would have the confidence to do what they did in BC and say there would be oversight over it. If they had confidence it was going to go to combating climate change, they would say the AG would ensure it. Instead, it's set up in a fashion that there will be complete discretion to the government, to the minister, on a whim to fund their projects, their political priorities. And that's not helping fight climate change. Unfortunately, I think it would be, and my worry is that we're going to see the government taking advantage of the goodwill the public has on wanting to combat climate change as simply a revenue grab. They will tell you they value Northern Ontario and its potential, yet the minister doesn't once mention the North or Northern Ontario or the Ring of Fire in his budget speech. This is the third budget that the government has re-announced funding for the Ring of Fire. It's a re-announcement of a re-announcement. The conclusion we have come to is that the Ontario PC caucus is not able to support a budget that makes life more unaffordable, uncompetitive, and unsustainable for Ontarians. It's clear the Liberals do not have a credible plan for the province now or for the future. That being said, I've always said there's no monopoly on a good idea, and there were some initiatives that I liked in the budget. The $17.8 million over the next 3 years to support a special needs strategy is a step in the right direction. An additional $130 million in cancer care services is something I applaud. And the $333 million for autism services over 5 years is appropriate and well needed. And I note that in our PC caucus, a lot of us have raised the importance of community hospice and palliative care, and I'm glad to see there's $75 million allocated for that. Well, these are examples of the direction Ontario should be headed in. I almost feel this budget is one step forward and 2 steps back. Life is harder under the Liberals. Things are about to get much more expensive for the people of Ontario, and this government isn't providing the services taxpayers are paying for. The people of Ontario deserve better. And on that note, before we have an opportunity to ask questions, I know my finance critic, someone who no one else looks as good in yellow, Vic Fedeli.
Well done. Thank you. Hi, everybody. As Patrick had said, the bottom line today is that life in Ontario is more unaffordable. Taxes are going up on alcohol and tobacco, gasoline, and home heating. But tax credits that helped children, students, seniors, and families are now being eliminated. In fact, seniors will now have to pay more for their prescription drugs. We continue to have very serious concerns about the credibility of the government's numbers. The budget confirms the government is indeed using the one-time money from the sale of Hydro One as well as contingency funds to make the deficit appear smaller. But make no mistake, in only a couple of years, after these one-time sales are exhausted and the spending continues, this will leave a massive hole in the budget. We have a structural deficit in Ontario being masked over by various one-time supplements. It's not just us suggesting the numbers are questionable. Again, the government's revenue projections for 2017-18 are $4 billion higher than the Financial Accountability Officer's best-case scenario that he laid out for all of us just this past fall. As Patrick said, we had 3 budget asks: to make energy affordable, proper management of health care, and a credible plan to balance the budget. Magically increasing revenue when the government's own growth forecasts don't support it is not a credible plan. Using one-time revenue is nothing more than a Hail Mary pass. With the sale of Hydro One proceeding, energy consumers will see higher bills well into the future. They've done nothing to bring comfort to families who are struggling to pay their hydro bills. And the government is playing another shell game with health care funding, giving hospitals money with one hand and taking it away with the other. And I'll reiterate something that our leader said. As a Northerner, it's very disappointing that the only paragraph on the Ring of Fire in the budget was watered-down language from the announcement first made in 2014 and repeated in the 2015 budget. Patrick and I were there in May. There is no progress made on one of the biggest potential job creators in all of Ontario. That is very disappointing. So overall, the budget has failed to meet the 3 key asks from our caucus that we outlined over the past week, and it simply makes life harder for Ontario families.